It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. On today's episode, Jacob Winans is back to discuss the Florida Panthers being back at practice on Tuesday after their West Coast trip. We preview tonight's game against the Carolina Hurricanes, a rare Wednesday night game for the Panthers. And we are going to discuss a topic that is bigger than the sport of hockey, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this Wednesday, November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And don't forget to also follow Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, and the newest show on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NHL Prospects. So, Cats fans, this is a pretty cool part of the schedule for the Panthers because when you really think about all the travel, the time change, there's a lot of times throughout this week where the Panthers will have 2 days off, as you've seen on the schedule. If you look at it right in front of you, 2 days right before their game against Carolina, two days off right before facing the Edmonton Oilers, 2 days off before facing the Washington Capitals, and a lot of time for this team to get some rest. I mean, of course, me hosting the show and having a relationship with the PR department, I do see the practice schedule. So there's, to give you an idea of what the Panthers, as far as rest and rehab for all these guys, they're going each day after a game for the next week, the Panthers will have an off day every single time and then practice the day before. So just to give you guys an idea of what the Panthers, how their schedule is going to be looking like for the next week. But we do have a game to talk about tonight, a rare Wednesday night game, and we do have a practice to cover for the Panthers as they were back at FLA Live Arena on Tuesday, preparing for their game against the Carolina Hurricanes tonight. Even though, strangely, there is another storm on the way to South Florida. But let me bring in my guest on the show. Jacob Winans is back for another Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob, not only welcome back, but I hope you are staying safe down there in Florida.
Yeah, so you dodged a bullet this time up there in Connecticut for this storm, but yeah, we're all prepared. It's hopefully not going to be too bad, and yeah, we just had one a month or so ago, so we're pretty ready for it. And yeah, hopefully the power stays on and I can watch some hockey tonight. And no complaints there.
Yeah, I have a question for everyone who's outside of Florida. What are seasons? Because I don't know what that is. I'm feeling a little cold for I'm not used to cold during the month of November. If it's only for like a day. But just checking the National Hurricane Center for Tropical Storm Nicole, it's going to hit landfall about the Sebring, Clewiston area around Thursday at 1 a.m. So the Carolina Hurricanes have a back-to-back where they'll be facing the Edmonton Oilers tomorrow. So for them, it's going to be harder on the Carolina Hurricanes than it will be the Florida Panthers, actually, if we really think about it, having to travel back up there to Raleigh. But let's talk about practice real quick for the Panthers. So Aaron Ekblad skated, and the best part about this, Jacob, is we saw him on the road trip skating. We saw the yellow non-contact jersey with him. Great that he's just traveling with the team. Of course, that could be a time where, oh, I wanna sit back and relax, be with my family, skate on my own and all. But Aaron Ekblad and of course the coaching staff choosing to still being around the team. Of course, a big leader on the team too. Of course, the second longest tenured Panther right behind Alexander Barkov, but he wasn't wearing the non-contact jerseys, and then Paul Maurice confirmed that he will be eligible to come back on Saturday in their game against the Edmonton Oilers. He's already missed the 10 games, but has not missed the 24 days. So great sign that he's going to be coming back as soon as he is eligible.
Yeah, it's really important to have him back. He's our unquestioned number one defenseman. Defense, it hasn't been perfect. It's been defense by committee. But with Ekblad out, we have seen a lot of guys step up. Namely, Gustav Forsling, Brandon Montour has been out of this world good to start the year. Josh Mahura, our last minute waiver claim right before the season, he's really blossomed into. Honestly, he's been playing like a top four defenseman. So. Getting Ekblad back, hopefully none of these guys, their games regress, and all we're doing is adding to what's already been working. So it's exciting to get Ekblad back. And again, it's very reminiscent of last year when Barkov went down for those 6 weeks. Obviously, this wasn't quite as long, but the team held it down when Barkov was out. They stayed above 500. They won games. Same situation here. You lose Ekblad, and in past years, we may have seen the loss of a star player for a long absence kind of tank the season. This team definitely came through with him out. It was not necessarily a perfect road without Ekblad, but they treaded water. They stayed above 500. Now you get a superstar player back in the lineup. You get closer to being fully healthy, and they're still in a really good position, right in the thick of the early season playoff race as we try to get to that Thanksgiving window in a good spot. So definitely good to have him back.
And you think about also how there's been so much parity early on in the Atlantic Division as well. And so the fact that the Panthers, even though we would have loved to see a better road trip from them recently, that Arizona game was just a little bit of a killer for them. But you talk about like even the Atlantic Division of what's going on there. I mean, with Toronto losing last night, Detroit, Tampa Bay, all dropping games. So this is opportunity for the Panthers to still not fall behind too much. I mean, yes, one more game left against Carolina tonight, but the fact that they've been able to hold the fort there, and a win tonight, you tie for second. Of course, it's going to be a big challenge for them tonight as a Stanley Cup as a Eastern Conference favorite comes to town in the Carolina Hurricanes, but still a great opportunity for this team. And listen, we were talking about pre-recording about what we do with what the coaching staff does with the defensive pairings. I mean, the only reason why I'm willing to say Ekblad and Forsling will be on the same pair again when they come back is because of Mark Stahl and Gus Forsling, that the fact that they don't play on both sides. Brandon Montour has that flexibility to work on both sides. So to have Forsling in the same spot as Ekblad and maybe Montour paired with Stahl, which is with how Brandon Montour has played, especially creating shots from the point, being the quarterback on the power play, and it's just going to be hard for me to see him with Mark Stahl again. But the flexibility of that helps the team out as well.
I agree. So the deep pairs, it's going to be really interesting because I don't think anyone really expected Mahura to play as well as he has. But he's done that exclusively with Radko Gudas. So if you move him away from Gudas, you now have a pairing of Stahl Gudas, which is not ideal. But also you're taking a chance with, is Mahura going to be as good with someone else? So I think that Mahura Gudas pair has to stay for now. And then Forsling with Ekblad, we didn't really get a chance to fully see that. So I think you probably end up going back to that. And it's unfortunate for Brandon Montour because he and Gus Forsling have been fantastic together. You just hope Mark Stahl can step into that pair with Montour and not kind of be like an anchor or weigh him down. You want Montour to continue playing at a high level. He's definitely earned himself some more ice time. I mean, I'd be shocked to see his ice time drop below 20 minutes a game the way he's played so far this season. And it's going to be a tough test tonight against Carolina because obviously you don't have Ekblad back yet. Hornquist is still out, and Matthew Tkachuk is serving the second game of his 2-game suspension. So I think we're on paper, we're heavy underdogs in this one. Mm-hmm. I don't envy Aaron Ekblad coming back on Saturday in his first game back in the lineup. He's got to chase Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl around. That's not an ideal situation to be thrown back into, but it's The D pairings are gonna. That's something I'm really gonna watch for that Edmonton game, because it's there's so much you can do and there's so little you can do, because there's some of these pairs, namely Mahura and Gudis, you just can't mess with it. You just can't touch you can't break up what's working.
Mhm. And we'll talk more about the defense pairings, and we're going to be talking about how who are going to be the guys sent down, and I don't think there's too much of a debate of who will be sent down uh, or placed on waivers once Aaron Ekblad does come back. That's a tough job for Bill Zito, definitely. And speaking of not envying, I don't envy Bill Zito as far as what he has to do. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Athletic Greens. Our next product is a product that I started to use more often. I started using AG1 because growing up in South Florida, West Kendall native here, Ventanita culture is very strong in South Florida. Of course, coffee runs that region, and drinking a lot of coffee, I needed a little bit of a break from it. So I started taking Athletic Greens. So so what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfood, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients support your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you 1 free year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Back on this November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is here, obviously. So, Jacob, when it comes to the job that Bill Zito has to do, we talked about the defense pairings, even though I could see Josh Mahura flourishing with someone like Brandon Montour, who's elevated his game. I think that we could very well see eventually a Mahura Montour line. That's something I would like to at least get experimented. But Bill Zito does have a tough job, and we we spent a good 2 minutes prior to recording just trying to calculate how the Panthers will get under 85.5 prior to Saturday's game against Edmonton. And of course, Edmonton will be without Evander Kane after taking a skate blade to the wrist from Pat Maroon on Tuesday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So our thoughts are with Evander Kane, despite all the off the ice issues. Hope for his recovery, but it doesn't. This doesn't seem to be a hard transaction for pair of transactions for Bill Zito to make of who he's going to send down. Waivers exempt players first. Matt Kierstead is going to be one of them. Alexei Heponiemi called up for a little bit, played one game, that game against the Anaheim Ducks, and that still doesn't get them to 85.5. The one transaction that's gonna likely get them under but barely under is and that's what makes the Eric Staal signing a little bit more difficult for this team. Once they did make the signing, is a player who hasn't really played that much for the Panthers, even though he has quite a bit of playoff experience, is Nick Cousins playing on that fourth line center. You look at what he's making, 1.1 for the next 2 years, which team friendly deal, but in a situation like this, which we're likely going to beat this dead horse all season based on the situation with the cap, but chances are he's likely gonna be the victim of waivers this time around. At least that's the expectation based on playing time. Any debates or disagreements on who will be the one sent down for the Panthers to bring Ekblad back?
No, I have to agree, simply because there's not really any other option for what they can do. That's just kind of the situation they're in right now. It's unfortunate, especially for a guy like Nick Cousins, because in Kierstead and Heponiemi's position, obviously with Ekblad back, Kiersted's not playing, so it's better for him to be in the minors getting playing time anyway. Alexei Heponiemi, a guy who's still developing, but in his call-ups, he's been used primarily in a bottom six role, which is not really his game. So again, it's better for him to be in the minor league developing. A guy like Nick Cousins was signed in the offseason to hopefully fill an every night bottom six role. He's being paid as an every night player at 1.1. This obviously I'd be shocked if this is what he was expecting when he signed. It's difficult. It's a difficult position for Bill Zito, and it's difficult for Nick Cousins. And the part that's just slightly frustrating, I know we don't have the financial flexibility and wiggle room. It's just you kind of wish you did, because Eric Stahl is going to continue to center that fourth line. And I don't think watching the games, anyone can really debate who's the better player right now between Eric Stahl and Nick Cousins. It's obviously Nick Cousins who's the better player at this point in time. So for Nick Cousins, it's tough because he's likely going to get waived, and it's a situation where he's good enough to be on the team. He's good enough to be in the lineup every night. It's just a numbers game, and that's a really difficult position for him to be in. But like we've been discussing, there's just no other options. There's no financial flexibility with this team this season, and that's it's going to be a tough year with the cap. It just is. Things open up next year, but there's a lot of navigating to do to get through this season.
Yeah, and the thing is, they could put they could do the same thing with Eric Stahl as well, because his cap hit will get him under as well. It's only a difference of like 300,000 between the two salaries, and that will still get him under 85.5. If you put Kierstead, Heponiemi, and Stahl, putting Stahl on through waivers, but we've seen who Paul Maurice favors. Obviously, of course, the history between them also speaks a lot to it of who's going to be the one sent down. But I mean, subtract 3, add 1. At least good news if that happens is that at least you'll have one player on the roster who you'll have at least as a scratch, so that you could bring him in case of an injury situation, because we do not want to see the same situation that happened in Boston, because honestly, the fact that the Panthers even made that specific game close, I don't like using moral victories here, but it kind of felt that way, that they were able to still keep it close. And of course, seeing Boston about how they're flourishing this year as well is just okay. The Panthers still know, despite all these challenges, that they still have a really damn good hockey team.
Agreed. Yeah. So definitely a huge plus to be able to have at least one healthy scratch, because playing with a roster of just the bare minimum guys, it's just brutal. Not even just from a game standpoint, it's from a practice standpoint, because if anyone needs a maintenance day, if anyone has an injury, they're banged up, there's no one to even fill in the practice. So the practices don't look like what you're going to have in the games. The games, there's no rotation. Players are locked into their spots and nothing changes. It's definitely not an ideal situation. So having at least a healthy scratch left, that's definitely beneficial. Now, again, when we go back to the Stahl Cousins debate, I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head. I think it's going to come down. It obviously is going to come down to who Coach Paul Maurice really favors right now, and the familiarity aspect of it. He clearly favors Eric Stahl. So it's a tough situation for Nick Cousins. I hope he's receptive to the move that's made. Whatever move is made, I hope he's receptive to it and understands that it's a kind of a business decision, kind of a cap space decision. It's not a knock on him as a player. But yeah, it's not an ideal situation for the Panthers to be in, and we definitely, especially on the D pairs, have to hope that the defensemen stay healthy, because we're that healthy scratch that we have won't be on the blue line; it'll be a forward. So we're playing with fire a little bit this year as far as the roster moves go.
Yeah. You're putting that very kindly when it comes to that last statement that you made when it comes to that. So so the Panthers, of course, they swept the Carolina Hurricanes last year. Spoke a little bit about it with Alex Baumgartner, but the main line that's really putting a lot of the damage is that second line for the Carolina Hurricanes of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Marty Necas and Andrei Svechnikov. With and and think about how Kakaniemi after that offer sheet that happened, the whole drama between Carolina and Montreal, found himself in a bigger role, got himself a nice pretty decent term deal for him. Seth Jarvis is a guy that's been hyped for years for the Carolina Hurricanes to make an impact on this team. And let me check the Seth Jarvis's points. To 6 points through 12 games. So still half a point a game, still a decent role player for the Carolina Hurricanes. But of course, the addition of Brent Burns for them, it was a salary dump for the San Jose Sharks. But Brent Burns still a great puck mover, still a guy who even though he's not the fastest skater, can get on, can be the trailer on the rush and just nail a one-timer from the point as well. And of course, the Jennings Trophy pair of Frederik Andersen and Antti Raanta. They've just always been known as just a defensively sound hockey team. Of course, facing them 8 times in 2021. I remember that game that they went 1-for-9 and how frustrated we were just looking at that power play at the time. Still, we spoke about when Aaron Ekblad comes back about the tough challenge that the Panthers have about facing Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but this is no Ekblad tonight, still no Matthew Tkachuk. I don't like calling things scheduled losses, Jacob, because this is the NHL. Any team can beat another on a given night, but this is a tough hill to climb for the Panthers, regardless.
Yeah, definitely. Just on paper, like I said, we're the clear underdog on paper. But again, the flip side of that coin is it doesn't really matter. We got a taste of it on our own. That game against Arizona, for example, going to Arizona and just letting a team hang around, and they ended up killing us on the power play, and we couldn't really recover from that. The Kings game is another example where some weird things happen. We're the favored to win that game. We're probably the better team on paper. It looks like we take a lead. Pretty bad call, kind of changes the whole course of the game, and things get weird. So it's a situation where you can't go into the game expecting a loss. Obviously, on paper we're outmatched. We're missing a lot of guys. 2 of our top 3 players in Tkachuk and Ekblad, but Carolina is a team that. And Hornquist as well. And Carolina is a team that we played last year with Barkov out, and it didn't look like we were supposed to win that game either. And we got some big performances from a lot of the depth guys. Duclair had a big game. Anton Lundell had a big game. We end up coming out with that win. So
3 power play goals in that one because it was
exactly
4 goals in the first period.
Exactly. So it's a situation where if we're gonna pull this one off, special teams has to produce. The penalty kill can't spot the other team a goal. You can't spot Carolina a goal or 2 on the power play. The penalty kill has to be locked down. In the power play, you're going to at least get a power play or 2. That's just the nature of the game. Carolina's fantastic, but they're not going to play a completely clean game and not give up a single power play chance. So when you get those chances, you have to capitalize, because at 5-on-5, we're definitely outmatched in this one. It's a big character test for the team early here in the season. If you're able to come out with that win, it's a big 2 points, but it's also just one of those wins that you can kind of build on as a character win. A game you're not supposed to win, but you win anyway. Those go really, really long way in the locker room and the belief in what the team can be for the year. So I'm excited to see how they come into this one. They're not a team that's been the underdog very much in the past couple of seasons. They definitely are tonight, and I'm excited to see how they respond to that.
Yeah, and I believe the broadcast spoke about the Panthers as a team that draws some of the most penalties in the NHL. I'm trying to find it as we speak, but I'm not able to pull it up. But the Panthers just being able to, and of course their speed has a lot to do with getting guys to hook, hold, interfere, all that stuff. So their speed is a big factor for this team and trying to be up a man. And of course, Sunday was a very encouraging special teams performance where they broke their streak of giving up a power play goal to 9. So now now the Panthers got that a little bit off their back as well, and hope to continue to grow off that, and of course gain a power play goal. So one step at a time for this team, and of course, and three major players missing once again for the Panthers. And I'm glad you brought up last year's matchup between Carolina and Florida, where hey, you still got to put the skates on and you still have to perform. But in segment number 3, we are going to be discussing a topic that happened over the weekend throughout the NHL, and a situation that is bigger than hockey. Jacob and I will be discussing that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on the Wednesday, November 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Jacob Winans here for this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. So, over the weekend, ladies and gentlemen, we did have a signing of the Boston Bruins signing defenseman Mitchell Miller to an entry-level contract. And you might have seen some reactions of why, or this is nasty, or what is wrong with the Bruins. And to catch some of you up on why that is, back in 2020, Mitchell Miller was drafted in the 4th round, 111th overall by the Arizona Coyotes. And then, of course, rumors surfaced about him bullying a person of color who was also disabled as well. And it was a situation that had been happening for years. So the Arizona Coyotes at the time, due to that, released them from his, well, not released him. He didn't even sign a contract, but they rescinded the draft pick of Mitchell Miller and parted ways with his draft rights. And of course, the Boston Bruins signing him just created an uproar, which is justified. So a little bit of what Mitchell Miller did to this kid that was a classmate, someone who he had been around for years, and a situation of urinating on a lollipop and then trying to have him lick it, something like that. And that's as much as some of us know. There's probably some more egregious details that we don't know about, how the amount of trauma that someone like Mitchell Miller has placed on someone. And Jacob, I want to get your thoughts about this situation. Of course, we've spoken a lot about the culture problems that are not. It's not just an NHL thing. It's not just a Boston Bruins. It's not a Florida Panthers thing. It's just a body of the body of hockey as a whole that is just continue to just not only have these issues come up, but the lack of accountability that happens for these guys.
Yeah, so when addressing the Mitchell Miller topic, it's unfortunate because I feel like we've spent a handful of segments on the show in the last few months talking about things that really have no place in the sport. But obviously, when something like that comes up, you have to address it. Going back to the incidents that led up to Mitchell Miller's draft night and why he even fell to the 4th round, because he was an early round talent. But every team in the NHL knew that there was something behind the scenes that had resurfaced, and a lot of teams just didn't want to touch him on draft night until later in the draft, where the Coyotes felt they had a chance to take him. And as you know, taking a guy later in the draft, less discussion. It's usually quieter, not as many eyes on the 4th round as there are on the 1st round. So that's kind of why they took a flyer on him late. They ended up making the right decision and cutting him. But the incidents that led up to this, like you said, the lollipop incident was egregious. There's physical abuse, beatings and fighting and physical bullying. And then there were a lot of things that were mental and emotional abuse. The use of the N-word was a repeated issue. There was a lot of demeaning things, degrading things that obviously I'm not going to repeat these things on the show. If people wanted to look into that themselves, I encourage people to go read it, just because it's important to shed a light on it and to just be aware. So I do encourage people to do that, but it was a lot of stuff that no one should ever have to go through. And Mitchell Miller put this one young man through years of this kind of torment. So it's important to remember that even though this began when he was, I want to say 14 years old is what was said, was 14 years old. One, that is still old enough to know right from wrong on a basic level.
Mm-hmm.
Two, just because it happened a long time ago or years ago does not excuse that it happened. And I do believe in second chances. I think people, I have no issue with people getting a second chance, but I feel like a second chance has to be earned and not given. And all accounts from these incidents were that Mitchell Miller did not do anything to earn a second chance. He showed no remorse. He and his family, it's been reported that he and his family were openly hostile in the community and towards Isaiah's family, and almost made themselves out to be victims, as in a way of, because of you coming out with this story, now my hockey career is ruined. And it's just a completely wrong way of looking at it. It's not because of the victim that your hockey career is ruined. It's because of your actions that your hockey career is ruined. And if you lack that accountability and you lack that self-awareness, then you have to deal with the fact that you lack an NHL career. And being a professional athlete, no matter how good you are, it's not a right based on your talent. It's a privilege that you have to earn based on your talent and everything that comes with that responsibility. And in saying that, I do want to commend the players on the Bruins, who the Bruins kind of have a reputation, especially in our division, of being a team that kind of plays on the edge sometimes. They're a team that's tough and nasty to play against. They can cross that line and play dirty at times, but that's on the ice. Off the ice, Patrice Bergeron spoke out and said that a person with the character of Mitchell Miller is not welcome in their locker room. A lot of the players were opposed to the signing. They made that known vocally. They were public about it, which is something that in hockey does not happen very often. You don't often see hockey players go against their front office. You don't see hockey players publicly call out their GM or the owner or anything like that. Hockey players kind of have a soldier mentality. They just follow the leader. And this was a case where that just wouldn't have been acceptable. And Patrice Bergeron led the charge with that team in speaking up and saying, this is not welcome in our locker room. We have standards, and this player doesn't meet our standards. And I have nothing but respect for that, and I really commend him for doing that. So there's definitely more. There's definitely more we can discuss, and I'll throw it back to you. But that's just my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, and rivalries aside with the Boston Bruins and all that stuff, love Patrice Bergeron and his leadership. He's of course longtime Bruin. Awards like Selke 5 times in his career, but the fact that people are following his lead and he's calling out Don Sweeney, which Patrice Bergeron answering these questions instead of the GM is a little bit cowardly when it comes to this. And of course their team president Cam Neely coming out to discuss that this is the most regretful thing that he's done so far in his tenure as president, and of course not consulting with the victim's family as well, as like, hey, would you be okay with this? And of course the NHL not having any knowledge that they want to this to happen as well. And then Gary Bettman coming out saying that he will not be playing in the NHL. But honestly, I think for Gary Bettman saying that is, I question why he's saying that, mostly for public perception. That's just my opinion on why Gary Bettman said what he said, based on his reputation as well. But of course the victim, Isaiah Meyers-Crother, let's talk about the victim there. And if he showed any remorse, and the victim of Isaiah Meyers-Crother say they felt it was sincere. He gave him a hug. He felt that it was genuine. I mean, I know this is a fictional scenario that I'm bringing up right now, but the bench warmers, with Rob Schneider, David Spade, and John Heater. Of course, in that movie, Rob Schneider was exposed as a bully instead of the guy being bullied, and of course, a guy living in his basement, uh, traumatized by someone who had bullied him. I know that's a fictional scenario, but just paints a little bit of a picture that just one person and the words that they say and physical and emotional abuse that someone goes through, especially at a young age where your mind is not fully developed yet too, and with a disability as well, and being a person of color who, even if you don't have a disability, being a person of color in this country is already hard. Just adding so many different things to that, and having this person continuing to degrade you and make you feel less of a human being. Ian McLaren, host of Locked On Boston Bruins, spoke about how he was made fun of and bullied, and that this could be possibly you can possibly label this as possibly a hate crime for what Mitchell Miller did to Isaiah Meyers-Crothers. And it's just it's the remorse part. It all comes down to the lack of remorse when it comes to this.
I agree. Isaiah's family spoke and actually wrote a lengthy letter as well, explaining that they had always been open to an apology if there was a show of remorse that was not court ordered. If there was any show of regret or remorse, or just a genuine, like, I acknowledge what I did to you, and I want to make that better. They have said that they've waited for that. They've wanted that, and that Mitchell Miller would have their blessing, if that, like, had that come at the proper time. And it just didn't. It's unfortunate because Mitchell Miller is a guy who you don't get drafted in the NHL. You don't make it to the professional level unless you're an absolute star at what you do. So Mitchell Miller 100% grew up an absolute superstar in hockey at the middle school level, at the high school level. This is a guy who was a star, who had everything in front of him. When you have that, naturally you're going to be kind of like the big man on campus, right? You're going to go to school. Everyone knows you. Everyone wants to be around you. And there comes a certain amount of responsibility with that. So he has a little more influence in a high school or middle school setting than any other student would. And if you use that to extend some kind of kindness, or to bring Isaiah in as a friend, or take him under your wing, Isaiah's life and his experience at that time is completely different from what was done. It's like the old Spider-Man line, the Uncle Ben: with great power comes great. Everyone knows that. And when you're a superstar athlete at that age, you have a lot of power and a lot of influence for your peers. And how you use that is huge. And Mitchell Miller used it in the completely wrong way, because he could have been a massive positive influence on Isaiah's life instead of a massive negative one. And it's clear he was well aware of the influence and the popularity he had, because there was a story that came out where he would make Isaiah say or do things just to sit at the lunch table with him. One instance, he was reportedly required Isaiah to call himself Mitchell's N-word in order to sit at the table with him. And it's like, that says to me that you know how important you are at that school. You know how badly people want to be around you. You know you're a star, and that's simply making a choice to use that in the wrong way. And he could have done the absolute opposite and been the ultimate positive influence in someone like Isaiah's life, and he chose to be a negative one. So when you lack remorse for that, that's a conscious decision, and it's self-inflicted. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the rest of his hockey career is going to look like. I don't know if there will be one. Perhaps he goes overseas. I'm not. That's usually what happens when guys have personal issues off the ice that like eliminate them from playing here in North America. Tend to go overseas and build a career there. But regardless of what happens with his hockey life, I really hope that there's some character development and there's some accountability, and eventually just some betterment as a person, with outside of hockey, because hockey is secondary to who he is as a person. And I hope he's able to improve, because it's, like I said, second chances are, they people should get second chances, but they're earned, not given. And I think Mitchell Miller has a lot of earning to do as far as getting his second chance.
Yeah, and for him still being in his early 20s, and his brain not being fully developed as well. Of course, it takes really until the age of like anywhere between 25 and 27 to really fully develop as a man. And I hope that he takes that time right before those ages, to really fully develop his character. And one more thing is the Hockey Diversity Alliance also put out a statement in relation to uh, Mitchell Miller and Isaiah Meyers-Crother as well, about trying to better these behaviors on people who just want to be included, period, not just in hockey but in society, period, about counseling, not canceling, as well as just learning that people's words can really hurt. But of course, when talking about these issues, they're always not going to be received properly by the opposition. And sometimes people think that they have to walk on eggshells as well, because they don't know how it's going to be received as well. And really loving the approach that the HDA is taking to counsel, not cancel, so that if 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 acts of basically ignorance happen again, that's saying, hey, I'm a person just trying to live a meaningful life, just like you, and that see me as a person, more importantly. And the HDA also spoke about how ever since that they formed, a black GM and a black coach in the NHL, and still continuing the great work that they are putting out there. So a lot of credit to the HDA. A lot of credit goes to the HDA in a situation like this, and just trying to just continue to have some inclusion in a game, and hopefully that the game loves them back as well. But Jacob, I know this wasn't obviously an easy conversation to have, but one that is necessary. About we talk Panthers, but of course we talk about the sport of hockey as well, even outside. But I want to thank you once again for jumping on, and of course having this difficult conversation that we had here on this Wednesday morning. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yeah, you can follow me online at Jacob Winans 8 on Twitter. I'm super active there throughout the Panthers season. And yeah, thanks again for opening up the floor for that. I really truly hope that we can stop having to have these conversations about these super negative topics. But I think by having them, we're getting closer to the end of some of this stuff that really has no place in hockey. So I commend you again for opening up the floor for a difficult conversation, but one that needed to be had.
Absolutely. Thank you once again. And this is probably not the last one that we're gonna have. So so hopefully this is, but not no expectations based on that. But Jacob, I want to say thank you once again, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, and the newest show on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today gives you a podcast in 20 minutes or less on the entirety of the sports scene, with some interviews and the take of the day. Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.